Hey, this is episode number 77 of Future Chat from Unwind Media. Every week on the show, we take an hour or so to discuss the week's most interesting science and tech news, and we're glad you're all here today. I'm joined, as usual, by Nick Maddox and Mike Attrell. How you guys doing?
What
I
the
feel
hell was
very
that, Rob?
feel very free today.
What do you mean by that, Nick?
Hey instead of hello? You always start the show with hello! Welcome to the latest episode of Future Chat from Unwind Media. I'm here with Weenie in the Butt to discuss your fluffiest news stories from the week of science and technology.
Wait,
Why did
am
I
I
become
Weenie
a
or the
dick
Thanks to
butt?
about you?
Audible.com for letting us talk about cell phones for a slightly above zero amount of money. Now let's get started.
Am I Weenie or the butt?
Oh man. So Nick has been
I'm sorry, I hadn't planned that ahead of
no.
time. But man, just
Nick,
flowed.
you had that ready to go. I should mention we're trying something a little bit different than usual this week, in that we normally front load what Nick refers to as fluffier news stories at the beginning of the episode. This week we're going to try something slightly different, as you'll see. But I don't think your reaction and your radio jockey voice, that was that made me sad inside.
Why is that, Rob?
I'm aiming for more of a CGP Grey type of thing.
More CGP Grey and less Hot 89.9 morning show?
Exactly.
Oh, okay.
Is Hot 89.9 a thing everywhere?
No.
Okay.
I think Hot is a pretty big brand, but
Yeah.
Hot 89.9 is Ottawa specific.
Okay, so it depends. They didn't buy that particular slice of spectrum everywhere.
No. No. I
Okay,
don't believe so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We had a story that we wanted to at least reach out to anyone listening. When it came up right before we started recording that Nick is using Mozilla Firefox browser on Linux, and Mike and I were commenting that he might be perhaps the only person on Earth right now using that browser on that operating system. And so I wanted to reach out to our listeners and say, if you're listening to this and you're using either Firefox or Linux, please let us know, because that's very interesting. But if you're using both like Nick is, holy moly, please reach out to us, because we need to get you in Nick's support group for those people.
And with
You
Oh,
that,
guys,
man.
just,
Yes.
you're the best, aren't you, though? Aren't you just?
Yes. So Nick, you have a couple pieces of follow-up this week.
I
Why
do.
don't you get to the one you like the most?
Have we actually talked about my pepper plant on
think so.
Future Chat?
I'm sure we have.
yeah.
Okay. Yeah, because I had one that died. Very sad.
Yes.
I'm actively learning how to deal with gardening in Alberta with all the very, very, very peaty potting mixes that seem to be here.
Okay.
And so that one died, got a pest problem, couldn't recover, etc., etc. So I'm using one that was growing in the Southwest, courtesy of a relative of Kaya's. And I'm looking at it right now,
hmm
and it's doing so much better. Like it's got a bunch of shoots that have just shot right out from the main body of the pepper that grew all summer.
Okay.
And I'm looking at it and going, why on earth did I even bother putting it outside this summer? Because, I mean, back home, I'm used to saying, oh, well, they will grow fine inside in a window or something, but if I just put it outside in natural sunlight, it'll do so much better. I don't know that that's the case in Calgary for a more tropical plant.
Right.
hmm
Yeah, it gets cold at night, and I think that severely hinders growth of a tropical plant.
Makes sense.
Yeah, and so it's actually flowering for the second time this summer. It dropped all its flowers after transplanting because that's kind of hard on plants.
hmm Well, it's hard
But
on everyone. But
it's got flower buds everywhere now, and what the hell was I doing all summer? I should have just left it in the southern window we have.
I guess so.
where
Are
the
there
temperature is slightly less prone to fluctuation.
are there peppers yet? Like the fruit?
No.
No.
Hmm,
If it produces fruit in this window, that will be the first time it's done so since its birth.
nice. So, Nick, I hope you will take a photograph of your beautiful flowering pepper, and so I can put it in the notes because
I hope
I,
so too.
I know I've seen pictures of your pepper. This is a lot of peas. I know I've seen pictures of your pepper before, but
You've
I
seen pictures of my pepper previously?
I don't think I've seen it flowering.
You've perceived pictures of my pepper previously?
I didn't perceive any. No, I saw them.
You'd like to see the production
Yes.
of the pepper which you have previously perceived.
Um, so Nick, what's your next story about? Is it about power?
It's about
Power perception?
power
Uh,
production in
yes.
my province. Yeah,
Yeah, what
so
is it?
we talked about energy production a long time ago, and I was talking about how much I loved this one website from the Canadian Nuclear Society. And they obviously have just a touch of a vested interest because they want to show where the power generation comes from in Ontario and how much CO2 the nuclear reactors are offsetting.
Right.
And so we've looked at that a bunch. I look at it all the time just to get a sense of what the power generation statistics are like.
Right.
But do you guys have the link there?
I
Have
have
you
it open
opened?
right now. Yeah.
They've come out with the energy or the electricity generation statistics for Alberta. And I'm looking at it, and by gum, is that depressing.
It's very depressing. Does nuclear fall under other in this case?
Nuclear to be
There's
none, I think.
there's no nuclear in
No.
Alberta.
At all? Okay. That's even. Yeah. Okay.
So when I keep saying that Alberta needs to get off its ass and build a nuke, that's why, Rob.
Mhm. They have nothing. Okay. What is the other? Because that's even more
Yeah.
than hydroelectricity.
I'm really curious about what other is, because this appears to be a new site, because they don't have like the the Ontario site has the statistics from the past 48 hours, but this doesn't appear to have that yet.
Right.
Probably, at least in part, because it's all coal, and that's pretty like the only thing that would have a significant fluctuation would be wind, and that doesn't account for
Even
a whole
then.
heck of a lot.
Yeah.
It's terrible because coal is 4 gigawatts, gas is 3.5 gigawatts.
Oh, looks like there's biomass and other is one of the charts.
Okay.
Yeah, and wind is zero point 0.8 gigawatts.
Right.
It's like, God bless them, they're trying, but you're not even hitting 10% yet.
Yeah. If you've ever hit, or if you've ever been in the far south of Ontario, or not Ontario, Alberta, wind is not as uncommon as you might think. It's super windy down there, and that's where there's just a ton of, um, what do you call them, windmills.
If you
Wind
actually
turbines, really, but
Yeah.
if you actually swapped the words Ontario and Alberta in your last statement, you would have exactly the same thing.
Yeah, yeah,
If
yeah.
you go down to southwestern Ontario, there's a big stretch of the 401 that's just like you're driving for, I think, a good 10 minutes at least, and it's all windmills.
Hmm. Good to know. At least there's some.
Yeah. So I'm looking at Ontario's nuclear capacity at Bruce, Pickering, Darlington. Wait, Pickering and Darlington might be the same. Anyway, Ontario's nuclear capacity at its 3 generating stations,
Mhm.
and I believe it's more power than Alberta generates in sum total.
That's a lot.
there's more
That's
people.
that's crazy.
There's more people in Ontario, though. You need
It's a lot more people and a lot more heavy industry.
Yeah.
But my point in saying this is that it's possible. Like, you could build a nuke in Alberta, which would replace all the coal and all the off-peak gas.
Huh. I'll
Except for like there is a generating station. Well, it's not really a generating station, just east of here, a couple blocks.
right.
It produces all the hot water for Inglewood Ramsey and a few kind of buildings around downtown, and Max does it.
Right.
And I mean that's hot water produced from gas, and I can kind of see the argument for that. It's hard to replace that with electrical
Yeah.
at significant or at non-prohibitive prices.
hmm
But yeah, we could get rid of all that coal. We could improve the air quality for the entire province. But
Right.
eh,
Well, the thing that I note here, the difference between the two doesn't even seem to be so much like obviously nuclear is a big part of Ontario's, but Ontario, if there is coal, it's in a tiny other slice that's not even visible on the pie chart.
um,
It's just a non-existent blip if there's
I
any
forget
coal.
I forget when exactly you got to Ontario, but that was a big thing with Dalton McGuinney's first term as
Right.
Premier of Ontario. He said that he wanted to get rid of all the coal generation in Ontario. And part of what he did it with was initiatives towards, what's it? Efficiency.
Okay.
So the Ontario government was big on taking away your old refrigerator and stuff like that for a
Right.
while. And you got rebates for buying more energy efficient appliances and stuff like that.
Yeah. I
Yeah,
think
we could
also
do it
as
here too.
bad, yeah, as bad as the sort of like we have, I don't know if you guys, if Alberta has the same thing because I wasn't an adult when I lived there, but we have like on peak hydro or electricity costs more. And as stupid as I think that is, it's a good disincentive for people to use electricity when they're
Yeah.
going to be home, like that the sort of 5 p.m. to 11 p.m. hours, like that's they disincentivize you from using electricity in that time by making you pay
Yeah.
more for it.
Yeah.
It's
They
a
have
cash
that.
grab, but helpful.
They have that for some commercial contracts, I think, here,
Okay,
but for residential, they don't operate with that.
right.
They'll have like a daily. You can either be on a variable rate or fixed rate pricing for your energy,
hmm
depending on the day. Um, but it's not, or sorry, on the month. I think it changes each month if you're on the variable rate,
Okay.
but it doesn't fluctuate throughout the day depending on your time that you use it.
Okay. So I'm gonna people who are interested in this kind of stuff, I'm gonna put a link to both the Alberta and the Ontario one because they're interesting.
Okay.
Okay. Now, I guess I'm gonna say this is our big topic this week. Was it? It was only this week that the cabinet was announced, right?
Yep.
And
Yeah.
time is just passing super slowly in my mind. Um, we got a new federal cabinet in Canada with our new government being elected, and the three of us, are all pretty excited about it. Even though me saying it, I sound pretty low key. That's because I've had some time to process this. But Mike, you were saying that you feel free. Like you yelled freedom at the beginning of the episode.
Yeah, I don't know. I was the whole bamboozle of the Harper government. Like it was something to be truly ashamed of
hmm
being in Canada. And like I just saw article after article being written of how undemocratic and ridiculous the whole system was. And CBC did multiple documentaries on it, and scientists themselves came out and said like we are literally being muzzled,
Yeah.
and that wasn't an exaggeration.
There
And
were actually articles published in the journals Science and Nature about how terrible Canada's policy was.
yeah,
Right.
And that's embarrassing.
Yeah. No kidding.
If you're a scientist and the journals which would publish the best of your work ever are going, yeah, by the way, Canada, get it together. You're like, oh man.
Yeah.
yeah, but no, it's been amazing to see how quickly this change has come. Like I was saying before, it's not like it took, a year and a half to start this process. It was effective immediately. Scientists are free to speak
Right. And
about their
the
work.
thing that I find most
And
interesting
that's
with this. Sorry, Nick?
um, no, I was saying, and that's we're extrapolating just a little bit because this is based on a meeting that they had at Department of Fisheries and Oceans.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's all
Yeah.
I wanted to get in there.
Okay.
Yeah, but the unmuzzling is effective immediately. Like they did
Yeah.
it verbally because they wanted to expedite the message. They wanted
Right.
scientists to know that they could talk about their work.
Yeah,
If you were
and
encouraged.
there wasn't really an official policy
Right, exactly. That's the best
to.
part.
Well, there was an official policy to muzzle them in which
Hmm.
you had to go through your communications officer
Yeah.
or something like that. And I don't know if you had this, Rob, but we had a communications officer at NRC. Like he came in about when I was leaving and
Okay.
just disgusted with how things were going.
He was.
Yeah, he came in midway through my term.
Okay.
And we all kind of whispered to each other, what does he actually do? Like he put up some TVs in the lobby which are running a slideshow, but what does a communications officer do in NRC? And then it became apparent later that, oh God, this is actually terrible.
Yeah.
But it's happening.
Right. So at this point, I think it's nice to have a communications officer because like the media has gotten so important in getting your message out, but it's important to have a communications officer that is like has some scientific background, isn't hired by government to talk about government talking points.
Yeah.
One of the things that I have seen, like the muzzling thing, like if you go and watch the documentaries that have been made by the CBC, and I think the Fifth Estate did a really good one that we talked about in our episode from last summer.
The Silence of the Labs.
Yes, yeah, that's
Yeah.
the one.
I think I watched that one after that show.
Yeah, it's not illegal to talk about your work, but if you did so, you would lose funding and or lose your job. And so the Liberal government turning around and saying, we're not going to do that. You should talk about your work. We encourage you to share your findings, and we're going to fund science properly. Like it's just a good sign, and it's something that you can do immediately. It's something you can get into government and say, listen, so scientists, share your work. We know you've been literally muzzled by the previous government. And I don't know if you guys heard about this, but the Canadian embassies, like our foreign affairs workers, people in other countries, have gotten the same message. They got a memo from the Trudeau government saying,
Oh yeah.
you can also talk. Like, we encourage you. Everything used to have to go through the Canadian government in Canada under Harper, but now people are foreign people. I don't know what the words are because it's not my specialty knowing about this kind of stuff. Like, I just heard about it, but basically people in our foreign embassies are now able to communicate openly. Like, basically,
Or diplomats?
Diplomats, that's the word. They're able to go through and discuss foreign policy with foreign leaders and other people directly. They don't have to go through the Canadian government to make sure they're doing their job properly according to what the Harper government wanted. And I just think, like, obviously, if these people are people we've chosen to send to other countries to represent Canada, why are we not trusting them to actually do that?
Yeah.
Now, in fairness, Rob, they're not necessarily free in their interactions.
No.
They've been encouraged to be energetic and friendly with international media.
Yes.
And I'm not sure that's the freedom that we want for our diplomats, Rob. Some days maybe they don't want to be energetic and friendly. What then?
That's
What
true.
then?
What if you have a bad day?
Yeah. This is as bad as Harper.
So there's a couple points here that I thought were interesting that were based on some quotations from who was it? Just a guy that was being interviewed in this article. Oh, Swerdfager, I think. So a couple points was that scientists would be allowed to speak freely about their work quote unquote with only limited and publicly stated exceptions. So whatever those might be, I don't know if it's like, say there's like an Ebola outbreak in Canada, that's the kind of thing that you'd want to kind of figure out what's going on before a scientist just came out and said
Right.
stuff, possibly. Like, but the government would say we are currently not, commenting on this at the moment. We'll release a statement whenever, kind of thing. I'd imagine that would be a situation where you wouldn't just want everyone just kind of
Right.
saying stuff
Yeah.
without coming up with a game plan. And then the other thing was, it said that scientists will talk about science. They're not really in a position to talk about things beyond their scientific purview.
Right.
So again, that's, I don't know if it's kind of like a reading between the lines kind of thing, but it's like, if it's about your work and your results, then talk about it. Otherwise, you're not really needed to comment on it.
Right. So, but I think what that means is in public statements to the media, they can talk about other things, just not like why would you go to like a chemist for some kind of political science story? It's you don't necessarily you wouldn't want their opinion. So it's like government workers, public service people are supposed to remain objective politically, and so I think that's what that is getting to is that you wouldn't want them you still want them to remain objective politically, but when we're talking about science, when we're talking about their work, they are free and encouraged to share
Hmm.
any details they have about it with the media.
Yeah.
Well, and it sounds like they're supposed to keep to their areas of expertise,
Hmm.
which I'm not jumping for joy over the restriction, but it makes sense
Hmm.
in that I mean you wouldn't go to my old boss who was the head of the forensic document analysis section and say, "Oh, hey, so what does your data say about the population in the cod fishery?"
Hmm.
Like Luke's gonna be like, "Well, that's not my expertise,"
Right.
and that makes sense. Like you can freely speak to your area of subject matter expertise, but
Hmm.
other than that, I guess they're asking you to withhold speculation
Yeah.
if
Always
you're
useful.
not an expert in the field,
Yeah.
which is something I think you should just do anyway, but
Yeah.
yeah.
Or at least like because I'm imagining when you say that you wouldn't phrase it as speculating. You would, or the media wouldn't phrase it as speculation. They would say this top government scientist says this
Yeah.
about this.
Yeah.
Exactly.
They would go to Luke and say, senior government scientist says he's not crazy about Mercedes-Benz, but he really likes his espresso and sushi.
Yes. Oh man.
It was funny because
Um,
I did that XKCD thing when I was researching corrosion. It's like this just in. Leading national expert on stainless steel crevice corrosion cannot find his effing shoes.
yeah. A little off topic.
Details.
Yes.
So this is like I gotta say, oh, we haven't gotten to okay. By the time story number 4 comes around, I got a little monologue to go on.
Okay. Well, let's go to the second part of this, which is um, well, the link specifically is a story from Gizmodo, which is kind of it's not specifically Canadian focused, but kind of everyone around the world, and the states obviously being closest to us covers it the most. Kind of just it's interesting to get other places' perspectives on this change. And so it's this story about the cabinet and about all of the science focused or science adjacent ministers in the new cabinet.
Oh
Um,
my God, right? There are 2 of them.
well, and then there's also like the environment now
Yeah.
also has climate change in there, which is a huge part of
Yeah.
science that's coming out. It's it, it's really a refreshing change to see more people sort of monitoring or at least kind of heading scientific direction as opposed to having one person who was called, for instance, the Minister of Industry being in charge of a lot of science funding and having the minister's name now be or the title now be Ministry of Innovation, Science, and Economic Development. That is a little more well-rounded. It still has that tinge of, this is also industry, and we're trying to make money for Canada, but we're trying to do it in a way that involves science and research innovation as opposed to just being focused on industry.
Yeah. It's interesting.
Making.
It's interesting coming from being A, in Alberta, B, in Calgary, and C, actually working in oil and gas, and talking to people, especially about the federal politics. And everyone's like, oh, hopefully Harper stays. Oh, everyone else is so anti whatever. Oh, climate change this, whatever. And, climate change is one of those issues that's still very murky as far as what the data is telling us, but we're trying to act in a way.
Is it?
It's well, no, like the data isn't murky, but we're drawing conclusions and acting on data that we only have however far back that we're kind of preparing for a worst case scenario, saying if the climate change is primarily human driven and we have enough effect to reverse it, then we'll act on that versus waiting 1,000 or 2,000 years to see if that's actually the case.
Why wouldn't you do that?
No, but that's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying.
What if we make a better world for ourselves and it turns out to be all for naught?
That's what I'm saying. It's the worst case scenario is that we act on it and the world's better anyway. That's my point. Is that
but even in the best case, people are going to be like millions of people are going to be displaced and like there are going to be these far-reaching effects for a long time.
You guys, let me finish. That's where I was going with it.
Nope.
That
not happening?
The pros outweigh the cons.
Drop the hammer on you, Mike.
Sitting on it
and hammer of justice in future chat.
So, what the point was even aside from the fact that I am directly affected, and if economic policy goes the way of basically snuffing out oil and gas industry, then I'd still rather see that if it's based on responsible science and policy versus just turning a blind eye and be like, oh no, can't hear you, and not acting on it. Like the scientist in me can't live like that, even though I'm directly involved in it, and it's in my best interest for that type of policy to not be around.
Like the oil and gas industry, I don't think is going anywhere. It might just shift.
Yeah.
In that we still have millions or even possibly billions of gas-powered cars. We have like plastics is all based on oil. Like it's
petroleum,
not.
Yeah.
I was going to say oil and gas isn't totally going to die if only for plastics and polymers.
Yeah. Right.
Like
it's just going to be less of a giant industry.
Oh man, and pharmaceuticals.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
But, yeah, so that's the thing, but just more in a general sense, I'd rather see responsible science being done than looking out for my own self-interest.
Yeah. It's we have a long way to go because maybe not the whole time Harper was in power, things were kind of being undone, but it was a very slow trickle that kind of built up steam and just steamrolled over everything.
Yeah.
But it'll be with all of these new, very powerful people being in charge of kind of righting the ship, I think we're going to see a lot of positive changes come fairly quickly, as we've already seen. I'm, for one, I feel like half sarcastically being like, hey, NSERC, the new government's been in power for like 2 weeks now. When am I going to get my job back? But we'll wait a while for that. Mainly because there's a couple things that I'm working on with them anyways, so there's no reason to get snarky about it. So did you guys have anything else you wanted to say on the cabinet specifically? Because there's a couple of things around this that I still wanted to talk about. There's one here. There's been a lot of talk on the internet, a lot of memes about our new defense minister. And basically to start how much of a badass he is, and like just going through his CV, you're just like, wow, this guy is amazing. And I learned that, or I was going through a lot, and people were saying, typically in the military you can't have a beard, and this guy has an amazing beard.
He sure does. Oh my goodness.
And the people were saying the main reason that you you're not supposed to or can't have a beard in the military is because you're often required to wear gas masks in order to possibly save your life or stop inhaling dangerous things when you're in war zones or in active military areas. And so it turns out our defense minister has patented a gas mask that can be used regardless of his beard, because he, like, I don't know the exact, like, I'm not too familiar with I guess you'd call it Sikhdom, but he's Sikh, and they cherish their facial hair, and so and I
I think
think
it's
it even
more
goes
cherishing. I think it's more just
well, exactly, but I don't know
religious significance.
exactly.
Yeah.
And so he patented a gas mask that works with his beard and works with beards in general, and I just think that the coolest thing ever. He's like, no, you know what? I can't accept this. I'm not going to shave for this, but I will develop this technology so that we can, like, because he realizes the value of having a gas mask and one that actually has a proper seal, and so he did it. I just thought it was really.
I gotta say,
interesting.
with our ministry,
Mhm.
like, I look at a lot of the new cabinet, and like I looked at the old one and went, well, we've got a lot of these MPs and they haven't really done much of anything. They're just, they decided to run this way and they got it. Like, especially from back home, there are a lot of disc jockeys that were elected for the longest while.
Mhm.
And I look at our new cabinet, especially people like, what's his name? Harjit Sajjan.
Mhm.
And I look at it and I go, what have I ever done? What significant thing have I ever accomplished
Yeah.
looking at our cabinet?
Yeah.
Oh.
And there's a lot of them like that. It's true.
Have you seen the picture of the gas mask?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, it's
great.
crazy. And I'll put a link so people can see it as well. But yeah, it's awesome. So the last thing, Mike, you have in here is talking about the census.
Yeah.
And this just happened in the last couple of days, right? Or it was just announced.
Yeah, like I had heard about that it was one of their first orders of business, and I
Yeah.
think just a couple days ago they officially reinstated it. And it's similar to the unmuzzling where you just kind of have to say, okay, we're going to start doing this again. I was like, okay.
Yeah.
And then that was
Well,
it.
this is one of those things that they can actually do and just, telling the public service, oh, hey, this is what's going to happen going forward.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, so for those unaware of the census, like they have the normal census that they do. I think you basically do it when you fill out your taxes, don't you? Or it's around that same
get some of that
time.
information.
What's that?
What were you going to say, Nick?
it's separate. The
Oh, is it a
census
separate
and well, are we
You s-
talking the census or the voluntary long form survey?
We're talking about the first one.
The census. The
Yeah,
census
where it's like
is,
how many kids in the
is
household.
distinct.
Yeah. Oh, is it?
Yeah, it's like I had to do it once. It's got a bunch of strange questions. One of which I remember being on this day, like exactly this day, how many people are in your house, even if they're visiting?
Interesting.
Really?
Yeah, like it's
Huh.
designed to capture a snapshot in time.
Right.
Right.
Like, travel and stuff like that can be extrapolated from that.
Right.
Yeah. So either way, the non-long form census is just like 3 questions essentially to capture very basic
Oh yeah.
demographic representation, whereas the long form, which Harper decided that wasn't necessary anymore, and everyone except for him was like, "What? Why are you doing that?" It captures a lot more and actually helps out a lot of agencies that rely on that data to allocate services and that kind of thing. They give insight into if their services are actually helping.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's part of the science focus of the Liberal government now is to reinstate that. And it is an investment because it does cost money to issue it and it's a pain in the butt for people to fill out, but it does a lot more good for Canada than to not do it at all.
Yeah. one of the sort of themes that runs across this entire conversation is that it seemed like, and maybe it wasn't specifically this, but it seemed like under the old government, it was just like, oh, data doesn't matter. We'll assume things and we'll figure it out. Whereas, like, obviously on the face of it, that's just a terrible policy. But like getting rid of scientific data about climate change, shuttering all kinds of environmental research, getting rid of the census, like it's just like we don't need this data. We'll just guess and go with our gut on whatever policies we want to implement. And the liberals are just like, no, we should get data so that we actually have sort of information-based decision making, and it's a positive step no matter how you look at it. Putting something like the census in, ostensibly the conservatives got rid of it to save money because it's useless and is expensive, but from the point of view of sort of long-term planning, it's incredibly useful to have that information, even if it's not looked at in a year or 2 years. If it's looked at 5 or 10 years down the road or 100 years down the road, like it's very useful information to have.
Yeah. I just wanted to jump in and say the reason that the census died, ostensibly, is that Harper, the publicly communicated rationale anyway, was that if you don't fill out the mandatory long-form census, or at that point, there was a prison sentence associated with it.
Mm-hmm.
And so the publicly communicated thing was, it just doesn't make sense to send someone to jail if they don't fill out a census survey. And I remember the big criticism of that was that, since they started the census, and I think that would have been back around the time of Confederation.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, since they started this long-form census, no one has ever gone to jail for not filling it out.
Right.
Things have escalated to the first and second steps of not filling out the census, but no one has ever stared down a 5-year prison sentence and said, no, I will take this 5 years of my life because I don't want to fill out this 10-minute survey.
Yeah.
You can even half-ass the survey. Like, they're not going to check.
Right.
Yeah, it'll just be considered an outlier if your answers are completely out to lunch.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Like
we
that's-
also had, we had, we have a friend that she did her master's in stats or something like that, or she did a lot of stats work in her university career. And she actually said, like, Canada was a world leader in statistics on its own citizenry. And StatsCan was, a world leader in this kind of data acquisition and processing. And now it's just gone. Like, it's just, you killed it.
Right.
With one fell swoop. Because if it's not mandatory, then it's not reliable data.
Right.
And so I'm just so happy. Like, my main concern with this election was, like, starting out, it was the muzzling of scientists and the long-form census and just evidence-based practices in general. And after that, like, the funding of science and technology. And it's just, with the exception of funding, I'm looking at it and it's all happened. I'm just so happy.
Yeah.
Yeah, it makes sense.
They've just looked at the situation and gone, this doesn't make sense, we should fix that. And then they just fixed it.
Yeah.
Just because.
Yeah, I was worried when they came in that it's like I was holding my breath for the changes to happen, and I was hoping I wouldn't be proven wrong, that they'd take half their term to actually put them into practice, or that they wouldn't come at all. But I think they're showing very intentionally that they're sticking to their platform promises and making change right away.
Yeah. And,
# real change.
We'll see if they can keep up the meaningful change, and like, I don't think anybody is just with no sort of thought in the back of their mind that maybe this could change, and like everyone's has their eyes open because we've been dealing with 10 years under pretty objectively terrible policies, but I think everyone has seen so far during the campaign and up to the first couple of weeks, I think everyone's seeing that so far it seems like it's just across the board great. It's hard to have something bad to say about it. All right.
It's the benefit of the honeymoon phase.
Yeah. I mean, if you can get as much done in the honeymoon phase as possible, then more power to you. Now, for
But I also like that
Oh,
they've actually changed it. Oh, man,
yeah,
I'm getting some severe lag on this feed.
I can see that.
Sorry. I'd like to add 2 more cents if possible.
Yeah, sure.
Cool. I like that it seems that they actually genuinely care about the issues they campaigned on. Just because it's like, no, like, we actually really need the census, and we need it back as soon as humanly possible. So we're just going to go ahead and pound that in as soon as we humanly can.
Right.
And I mean, it's too late for 2015, but get ready 2016 long-form census.
Have I told you guys that I started intentionally filling out surveys now? Like when people ask me, like when I buy something and then they email me saying, "Oh, how did you think of your experience?" Whatever, I want to fill those out because I like being a part of data and I see the value in it. And it's like, if I want a better product, why wouldn't I tell them what I think of it, so that even if I liked it or didn't like it, at least they know that and they can use that for whatever they want.
Right.
There was... No, train of thought's gone. Sorry.
I filled out the Soylent survey when they asked.
Yeah, I did too. I did that this morning.
Oh,
Very useful.
okay, I remember now. They actually, in one of our friend's classes, the prof told them that they shouldn't themselves fill out the voluntary household survey because disproportionately, wealthier individuals or better off individuals are more likely to fill out such surveys. And so he said, if we keep filling it out as we will, all the data is going to be skewed towards people who are well off, and it's going to look like we're doing okay when we're actually not capturing all the data. And so, surprise, surprise, a bunch of university-educated progressive thinkers like filling out surveys and appreciate the importance of data.
If it was mandatory, hopefully that would get rid of some of that, but yeah.
That's the thing.
Sure. Yeah.
Who was saying that you shouldn't fill it out?
A university professor, to remove the data bias.
But that's not a bias if it's actually Oh, you're saying it's not representative though, because...
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
It's an interesting thought, but make it mandatory and then that goes away.
The benefit is that we don't have to worry about such things anymore, hopefully.
Right.
That's the plan. All right, why don't we switch gears here for a bit? Mike, you have just the words BlackBerry Priv in here. BlackBerry released a new phone. It's Android-based. What did you want to say about it?
I think it's interesting because we hadn't heard from BlackBerry since they released the Z10 line. It was more conventional smartphone focus versus their previous offerings where there wasn't a touch screen. Actually, the one before they had the touch screen, but it still had the main physical keyboard as the focus of the phone.
The Z10 didn't. The Q10 did.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah. So the Z10 was fully touchscreen.
Right.
Their previous phones, like the Bold and whatever, and then I think even the future iterations after the Bold, they started coming up with a touchscreen, but they still had the physical keyboard and the little mousy trackpad type thing as integrated into the phone. But this is the first time they've gone away with doing their BlackBerry OS as what powers the phone, and they've gone with Android, and hoping to win back some BlackBerry users that switched over to Android or iOS because of the weaknesses of the BlackBerry system. And they're also trying to keep their current BlackBerry users happy because again the BlackBerry OS was lacking in a lot of ways, and a big thing was just the app ecosystem was paltry, like
Yeah.
really very very sad. And even if there was a BlackBerry app, it wasn't well supported. It was very buggy. It just was very limited in what it could do. So people, BlackBerry users and non-BlackBerry users alike, they go more towards iOS or Android. So they're trying with this phone, the BlackBerry Priv, to keep their BlackBerry users happy by integrating privacy with their BES capabilities. And I'm not sure if they have any other additional privacy elements in it, but I know just in general their BlackBerry enterprise system server is very secure. So if they have incorporated that into it with also the Android operating system with the apps and functionality, then ideally you've created a phone that appeals to potentially everyone.
Right.
So I don't know if you guys looked at much of the reviews or kind of articles on this. The link that I came across is a Crackberry link,
Right.
and they're obviously very BlackBerry focused. So it's
Yes.
interesting. It's interesting to just read the review from a BlackBerry blog versus a Wired or a Verge type blog that's going to compare it to an iPhone or that kind of thing.
Right.
And I don't know. I like the idea of the phone. I think it's appealing to me in the same way that a Windows phone would be appealing to me, where it's different and it's trying to do something that no one else is doing.
Yeah.
So, do you guys think that this is going to be successful and keep BlackBerry in business, or is this kind of the last gasp before it tapers off into nothingness?
I'll give you my 2 cents and say this is actually a cell phone that I'm interested in, based on
What?
the. I know. I'm as shocked as you are. I just skimmed through the article as Mike was talking about. I was like, ooh,
Yeah, it's
that's interesting.
yeah, it's actually a good
What?
phone.
What about it? I'm very
Well,
curious.
I mean, a reason to stay away from BlackBerry strictly in general was that the app environment was terrible.
Mhm.
Just awful. I mean, unless you were forced to use it for business purposes, why on earth would you use it? But the things that the things that BlackBerry were legendary for were privacy and the physical keyboard.
Right.
And they've managed to incorporate that into an albeit staggered Android environment. Like it's not the latest Android environment that it's releasing with, so I guess the updates that way will be staggered. But I know I like having a physical keyboard, and I like the privacy stuff, and that's just it's interesting.
Yeah.
I feel like this would be a more sustainable avenue for BlackBerry to try and go for, just because, I mean, if you're trying to compete with Android and iOS, like, you're bringing a knife to a gunfight, and that gunfight is amid titans.
Yeah.
Like, you're not going to carve out a good enough market share unless you're going for premium pricing, premium product.
This is so weird to me. Can I just say that? I feel like I'm taking.
I'm shocked too.
I don't even know what to say. Like I've been working basically full time for Mobile Syrup this week, and so I've been writing. I've wrote a number of things on BlackBerry on this new phone and the stuff that's underlying it. And yes, it is. There's a focus on security, on privacy, and the one thing that they have done to really differentiate themselves from other Android phones is to add a bunch of security features on top of regular old Android. But I don't know if you can sell to that niche of a market unless they're kind of retargeting enterprise. I don't know if there's a market for
I'm
that.
certain that's what they're going for, because that's always been their bread and butter. I mean, this first smartphone ever phenomenon notwithstanding, it's
Mhm.
always been enterprise that's propped them up. That's the only thing that's kept them, you know, kept them in the mix this long.
Right.
But enterprise is starting to shift more towards iOS kind of thing just because they need that functionality.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's bizarre. This phone is bizarre to me. I want nothing to do with a physical key. Like I listen to a lot of podcasts about technology, and so I hear all these things about new keyboards coming out that are thinner than ever, and they have very little key travel, which apparently is important to people. But the less travel my keyboards have, the better I feel about it. Like I way prefer my MacBook Air keyboard to the keyboard that I'm using right now on my desktop. And I feel
Really?
like my priorities are just very different from most people. Like I really like typing on my iPad software keyboard. I don't know if it's something different about the way my brain has kind of adapted to technology, but I type much faster on a software keyboard than I ever did on a hardware keyboard.
Huh.
Yeah,
I are we what's happening?
I don't
Nick's all
know.
excited about this new cell phone and Rob wants nothing to do with it.
I don't think like I personally have no benefit. I'm not trying to any anything that I do with my phone, I'm not trying to necessarily keep private, with the exception maybe of text messages, which are like on iOS they're encrypted anyways, and
Yeah.
with regular SMS messages there's no encryption whatsoever, and any like even the priv, if you're using an SMS, it's not protected in any way because it just goes up to the cell tower. Like if you're using BBM, obviously they have their super encryption, whatever they have. I don't pay too much attention to BBM, but if you're going to use this for privacy, obviously that that's going to be important to you. But for me, it means nothing.
Although in fairness, in defense of BlackBerry, my understanding is that the biggest secret you've kept in the past 5 years is the name for Unwind Media before that was unveiled.
That was security by obscurity, though, I would say.
Yeah, but I mean, I don't think you've had the security concerns that come with, I don't know. I don't want to sound belittling, but like higher profile work,
Yeah. No,
perhaps.
I agree. No, absolutely.
Like, I mean, industrial espionage is a big thing,
Yeah,
and you've never really had to worry about that on a personal level.
right. No, I haven't.
Well, and also just a lot of companies will just require a level of privacy from their employees that have their devices. So if this satisfies those requirements, regardless of the reason for that requirement, then that's kind of what they're going after.
Yeah,
And before, BlackBerry might have been the only one that was able to offer that level of privacy, I guess.
right.
I honestly, I'm more excited just for their approach to the Android experience versus the phone itself.
Hmm.
And like some of the features of their launcher look kind of cool. And they have this thing called, I think they call it pop-out widgets or pop-up widgets.
Okay.
And it's essentially the same function as a widget, but instead of taking up like 25 to 50% of your screen space with the widget, it resides in its own icon, and then when you tap on it, it pops out the widget instead of just always being there.
Right.
Hmm.
So it's kind of like a quick view of an app almost. Like so for like a calculator, you can have your calculator widget, but instead of just always being there, taking up again like 30% of your screen, it just sits in an icon. You tap on it, it comes out right away. You don't have to wait for the app to load, which I don't know, might be unnecessary, but it's an interesting approach to it, I think.
Yeah.
And they have another thing with like the launcher, how right now on Android, when you hold down the home button and then swipe up, it goes to your Google search.
Yeah.
But the way that the BlackBerry launcher is set up is you have the customized. I think it's customizable or it's hard set, but to either your text, your BBM or email or something from that same launching function. Like other Android launchers
Hmm.
have that, which that's not new, but it's interesting they're baking that into their default experience. Same with
Right.
like icon packs. They have customizable icon packs already in there. You don't have to download an icon launcher and then customize it to theirs already within your BlackBerry Priv settings to have
Right.
icon packs. So it's almost like they're taking what's already out there from a customization basis and baking that into the experience.
Mhm.
And I'm just not the kind of person to go out and look for ways to customize my phone. But if my operating system already gave me those options, I'd probably play around with them a lot more. So
Sure.
if they release or if someone comes up with a downloadable uh, uh, ROM to put the BlackBerry Priv software on my phone, I might do that just to try it out.
Right.
Because like you, I don't have any desire for a physical keyboard. I use my swiping typing most of the
Right.
time. So
I I think a lot of people come to they look at new tech stuff like a swiping keyboard and think, oh, like I'm good at typing. Learning this new thing seems difficult, and when they start off, they're not very good at it. And I think a lot of people are also using older phones where the hardware isn't necessarily as good and able to keep up with it. Like I notice if I'm using SwiftKey as an example, that's the keyboard I use on both my iPhone that I use every day and the Android smartphone I've been using for the last couple of weeks. It's very obvious the difference that the software has when you're using it on different hardware. Like using SwiftKey on iOS is completely like at 60 frames a second. It's completely smooth, whereas using it on Android, it's kind of juddery. And the Google keyboard does a lot better job at
yeah.
it, but the SwiftKey keyboard I think I like more overall, but I can't use it on Android because it's just too juddery.
What difference do you have, or have you noticed between SwiftKey and the Google keyboard?
Not huge differences, but that being the main difference that I've noticed.
So why not just use the Google keyboard on
That's what
your?
I've been using, but
Oh, okay.
the nice thing about SwiftKey is that it syncs your kind of key map, I think they call it. So if you, for instance, you miss kind of like if you're swiping around past the E key to hit E on your way to a word,
Yeah.
and you always kind of miss it by a millimeter, it will learn that and it'll make
Right.
the virtual E larger than it looks. And
Oh, okay.
so I found that very valuable, having that sync between devices
Yeah.
and just keep track of all the stats I have and their prediction stuff. So my dictionary, for instance, is also synced across the two. Uh, yeah, so that's the main reason for that.
Right.
I don't know. I wouldn't be too upset with a physical keyboard just because, like, I do like swipe and I use it a lot. But I feel as though the number of times I have to differentiate between were and we're and stuff like
Oh,
that.
and wheel and well and aisle and ill. It's
Yeah,
like
id and I.
Yeah.
Yeah,
mine never predicts I'd. It goes ID.
yeah,
It's like really.
Yeah, it's like, as much as I like to talk about Freudian psychological theory, no, I am going for I'd, the past
yeah.
tense of I, or, you know,
Yeah. The,
or the
the
abbreviation of I would.
contraction. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like,
The
oh,
the thing that I have the way I feel, I guess, is the best way to put it about a physical keyboard is the same thing I feel about a car. When you need it or when you want it, it's so convenient and amazing. But when you don't want it, it's still there and it annoys you.
It's not though, because it's a slider.
No, but it's still there. Like imagine if that
It's
keyboard
not.
wasn't there. The phone would be so much smaller.
What? No, it wouldn't. The screen slides over the
No, but I
keyboard.
mean in volume, not necessarily
I
in
I'd still
footprint.
disagree.
No, but that's the way I feel. Like
Okay.
no matter how small it can be, like the fact that it slides out to have the keyboard, like it's a nice way to put a keyboard in there, and that it'll go away if you don't want it. But it's still there. It's still physically taking up that room, which is the same thing a
Rob,
car does.
Rob,
Like if you have a
Rob,
parking space everywhere, a
Rob,
car is incredibly
Rob,
convenient. But the fact is,
Rob,
there are places you can't.
Rob,
You know,
Rob, nobody cares about your feelings.
well, that's not true. I care about my feelings.
Well, Julia might too, but you're not the majority here.
Well, I know, but there are people that feel the same way as I do. I'm not alone in this.
this isn't a debate or a competition. We're just talking.
Yeah.
I know what you mean.
Yeah. If you've ever tried to park a car downtown during rush hour, during peak hours, you know that like that's the way I feel about a keyboard. Like I'm just like I would love to just be able to get out of this
I think
car.
that's a very poor analogy and a bad reason,
No,
but
but that's the
I
same
know
way
what
I
you mean.
feel. It's that I'm trying to explain with an analogy the way I feel, and that's the way I feel.
Rob just
That
slides out the keyboard. Oh, this is so cumbersome. I hate it. I just hate it so much.
that's not really what I'm saying. It would be nice, and that's why
Okay.
Uber I think is finding itself being so popular. Is that when you don't want a car, you don't need to have a physical car there. But like if you don't want a keyboard, yes, it slides away, but it's still physically there. And if I had it, like the reason that I've avoided phones that have physical keyboards for forever is that that's the way I feel. I would still know it's there, and it would still bother me that it's taking up all that space. When you can have a software keyboard, like not only that, but like you don't on a phone with a physical keyboard, you don't have a number pad, you don't have alternate keyboard, you have to do tricks with software or having different keys mapped to different places depending on context. Like there are a lot of things that get more complicated with a physical keyboard compared to a software one. And so just for me, I'm not trying to extrapolate to every human alive. Some people really like the physical keyboard, but I'm saying for me, it's very rigid and it doesn't go away. You're constantly having to carry a keyboard around with you with your phone, even though it slides away neatly beneath the phone, which is a great piece of design for someone who wants a physical keyboard.
Yeah.
I wouldn't want that trade-off.
50 extra grams you have to haul around every single day of your miserable life.
Right.
Okay.
Well,
So
exactly.
you guys didn't answer my question about if this, like, what the future holds for BlackBerry. Are they going to just stick to hardware now?
Oh, God knows.
I think it depends on enterprise, because if they're successful and they can reach enterprise again with this, I think they'll be able to do well in that area. But if if they end up just competing with other Android phones, then it obviously won't go well for them because it's more expensive, it's more complicated. They're trying to differentiate themselves in ways that I think most smartphone users don't necessarily care. The only people who are going to care are people who have stuff to keep, like corporate secrets, for instance, being the most obvious one. But I don't think the sort of black and white, edgy type of marketing they're going for is going to target enterprise all that well. I think it's going to be their outreach to enterprise and existing business that they've had that's going to be like, wow, this is a good focus on security and privacy. I'm going to do this. But if they're just trying to differentiate themselves to normal Android customers, I don't think that's going to work very well because there are a lot cheaper alternatives where people won't notice the difference.
Yeah.
Can you
Like
imagine if the government of Canada started getting contracts again and Rob had to have one for work?
If it's for work, if they're going to give me a phone, I don't have to use it.
Yeah.
I just used Outlook on my phone to connect my email when I worked there, and that's what I would always do.
I use my iPhone the same way. That's all I use my iPhone for is email.
Well, that's what I mean. I wouldn't use if they gave me a BlackBerry Priv at work, I wouldn't ever use that phone. When I did have one back when I was working for a different team at NSERC for 3 or 4 months. Not that I didn't get many calls on it anyway, so it didn't really matter. But when I did call people or when I did want to do something, I would just do it on my phone because I had my email there, I had my calendars, I had everything that I needed there.
Yeah.
So it's not really necessary to me.
Yeah, I think what you were saying before was interesting. With it's not going to make a difference to people because your average user is going to walk into their Fido store, their Tele store, Best Buy, and they're going to say, okay, I'm looking for either an Apple or an Android phone.
Mm-hmm.
And they're going to look at the price first, and that's really all they're going to, and they'll say, oh, does it work with whatever, like if you have some sort of peripheral or accessories, like, oh, does this work with my headset or whatever, and as long as it kind of checks off those boxes, they're not going to care if it has, a nifty little thing with the operating system, or the physical keyboard might in that case be a selling point. It's like, oh, that's cool, that's actually worth getting that phone because of that. But the finer details with how the privacy or how the operating system works, that probably won't make a huge difference.
Right.
versus just the price itself.
Yeah. Are we done with the priv for now? I think that was a very good conversation, but I feel like we should probably move on.
Yeah.
Uh, Next up, we have some world news about specifically, I think, relating to energy in different places in the world. Nick, why don't you start us off?
I shall. Geothermal power in Kenya. Apparently, Kenya is going through a bit of a power revolution. The federal government is investing heavily in geothermal power generation. And apparently, the current generating capacity in Kenya is something like 2,000 megawatts or something like that, but they could stand to quintuple it with the projects they're looking at. But I mean, obviously the main detractor with geothermal is that you have to burrow down like 3 kilometers or something like that.
Right.
Maybe it's more. Maybe I'm misremembering that. But you got
It's
to
not
dig a
that
big
order of
hole.
magnitude, yeah.
Yeah, you got to dig a big hole. And 2/3 of the cost of any geothermal project come from the construction, because after that it's more or less passive. You're just tapping into the heat of the earth.
Right.
And I don't know, it's interesting because it sounds like there's so much generating capacity there just going untapped. And if it's there in Kenya, I'm sure that you could electrify a lot of Africa along the same lines.
Mhm.
And I wanted to get your guys' thoughts. Like, what do you know? What are your thoughts? What are your feelings on geothermal, just to start with?
Mike, do you have anything you want to say right off the bat?
From my understanding and exposure to it, it's very similar to exploiting hydrocarbons, but you're essentially directly getting your energy from what you're drilling versus having to refine and burn the resources. So, and you know what you're saying about how far down you have to go and the cost, that's exactly the same thing with oil and gas. You're essentially going 3 kilometers below the ground, and all of your cost is the upfront drilling and construction. Once you've drilled the well, then you're just letting it produce. So that's I think in that sense, and because that's kind of the alternative energy generation anywhere really, then it shouldn't be that much of a stretch to go to geothermal if that's what's more readily available in Kenya right now.
Oh man, Mike, if the oil and gas industry does plummet and suddenly we're looking for more power that isn't based on oil and gas, could you personally mitigate your exposure by being able to drill deep holes?
Yes, I could. And there's an association in Canada called CanGEA, and it's Canadian Geothermal Energy Association or something. And they're big proponents obviously of geothermal, and they're trying to kind of get the government on the same page with that and looking at exploiting that as kind of a future energy source.
Hmm.
And yeah, from my understanding, it is a lot more sustainable than hydrocarbons because it's just kind of continually being produced. But I haven't looked too much into the geological specifics of how the energy is generated, but the principle's very similar to oil and gas.
Well, I mean, in geothermal, I don't remember what the heat transfer mechanism is, but you bring the heat up, you boil water, turns to steam, spins a turbine.
Yeah.
Same
In
old
this
song and
case,
dance, as you
convection.
always hear. Sorry?
Convection in this case. When we first started talking about this, I immediately went, wait, Kenya isn't like the middle kind of eastern side of Africa. I've been hearing a lot of things in the last, well, not 100 years, but before the last 100 years, I've been hearing about the Rift Valley in Africa. Like the continent is splitting, and it's splitting right there in Kenya. Like the Rift Valley, that's what's causing it's new
Oh.
magma welling up to form the new continent. That's where the energy is coming from.
Okay. So it's less transferable.
Right. This is a very specific region in the world where there's just a bunch of hot Earth coming up, and so
Love that
they're
hot Earth.
yeah they're taking full advantage.
Well, apparently,
Wait, so Rob,
Iceland.
what are you saying? I don't understand what you're getting at with that.
The continents are splitting right there. They're, like
Right.
it's been happening, and so there's new magma coming up. Like there's new crust coming up to fill
Yeah.
the void, just
Yeah.
like it is in the middle of the, I guess both oceans, like both Pacific and Atlantic oceans. There's it's forming new land there, and the way that happens is that new Earth is coming up to fill the void, and
Right.
it's hot because it's coming
Right.
from below.
Yeah. Well, the geothermal activity is not restricted just to those types of zones, though.
But it's a very active zone.
Sure.
This
Yeah.
Rift Valley.
Right, and that's why, and you're saying that's why they want to exploit it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Mhm.
Anyway, I know that I think it's Iceland.
Yeah.
They they do a lot of geothermal because it's just seismically active or some such.
Tectonic.
And they also
Yeah.
thank you. They also have a lot of hydropower just because it's mountainous and in the middle of the ocean. So lots of rain, lots of hydro potential. And for a long time, their power was so cheap that a lot of aluminum was smelted there because of a quirk of, economics, it was cheaper to load aluminum ore onto a cargo ship, ship it to Iceland, have them refine it in Iceland, and then send the aluminum back.
Mhm.
It was cheaper to do that than to refine it all there. And that's also why Quebec has a lot of, or used to anyway, had a lot of aluminum mining, smelting, yada, 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 because they have
Right.
so much hydropower up in the north.
Hmm.
But I don't know. Maybe Mike can answer this. Do you think this has applications in Canada at all?
Which part? The geothermal?
Geothermal.
You just asked me that already.
Did I?
Yeah. I'll answer again and say, yeah, I do think it's something that should be looked at.
Oh,
Obviously,
yes.
we have a lot more diversity in our energy generation right now, as we talked about earlier in the show. So
Mhm.
I don't think we'd be as reliant on it as places that's kind of their only uh, alternative energy source. But it's definitely something that should be looked at, especially because we have devoted so much energy and time into developing the oil and gas exploitation that you may as well use those same resources to exploit the geothermal, because it should be a very short leap to looking at a different type of, essentially a different type of resource, being
Mm.
geothermal versus oil and gas.
I
Okay.
think
Sorry, go ahead.
I just wanted to say before we move too far away from the whole like economic efficiency of places that have energy versus places where it's cheap to do things. Uh, if everyday people knew just how many different industries use that tactic of shipping stuff across oceans to process it somewhere else, I think they would go a little bananas thinking about it.
Yeah.
Like most textiles are the same way, where they just ship fabric across continents, across oceans
Yeah.
to have it sewn up and then shipped back to be sold.
Didn't we talk about the TPP last week?
Yeah, we did.
Or was that you guys that talked about
I
it?
think it might have.
I think it was
I
you
think
two
we
that
had a big
talked about
discussion on it.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah, in East Meets West, you guys talked about it.
Oh yeah, we talked about it with Matt.
Yeah, and
I
how
think.
that's why you have trade agreements, is to do that for each other.
Right.
So
Mhm.
But yeah, that's all I had to say.
Also, and a fun note, a lot of bananas are exported across oceans because
Yes.
travel of
Sorry,
bananas
what were
will
you saying,
drive
Nick?
bananas. No, I was going to say, because geothermal, if you're looking at renewable and sustainable forms of energy, the big problem is baseline energy. And currently, the only technology in Canada, anyway, that seems prepared to deliver baseline energy is nuclear. But geothermal or I wanted to say the other thing, and I just said the same thing again.
Mhm.
Biomass is often pointed to deliver baseline energy. But, I mean, there's only so much biomass that you can generate and then burn for power.
Right.
But geothermal, I assume you'd have to go deeper in Canada than you would in Kenya to get the same kind of
Yeah.
return. But I don't know what else you would use for that baseline power in a renewable, sustainable power mix.
Right.
What's the definition of baseline power? Just
So baseline power is it's similar to kind of baseline load in that you need some power there all the time so that people can do stuff when the sun isn't shining and the wind isn't blowing.
right.
As opposed to like peak generation stuff like that and that's one thing where solar and wind is supposed to be really good for, because solar especially tends to coincide with periods of peak demand for people.
Hmm.
So, I mean, heavy
Oddly
industry is
enough.
often,
Yes.
yeah, crazy, right? Heavy industry is often going just full guns when the sun is shining brightest.
Yeah.
And so a lot of solar generation and stuff like that is good to, deal with those periods of peak demand. And solar and wind tend to be complementary. So that's how you deal with, people wanting to do things during the day. But you still need someone to keep electric baseboard heating or whatever going at night so that people don't freeze, or to charge your Tesla for the next day's driving
Right.
and stuff like that. And that's like baseline being not necessarily scalable like gas-fired plants are,
Hmm.
because gas you can easily scale to deal with on-peak demand, but nuclear not so much.
Yeah.
I think that's where batteries come in, though. That ideally, when you're
Well,
off peak, you shouldn't need that much energy. Enough.
yeah, but that's a lot of batteries.
It is. That's fair, but I think we're heading in that direction.
Yeah, but I mean, the hope is you would have something like biomass or, I mean, geothermal maybe. Nuclear especially is good for it to just, keep things humming while nothing else is generating.
Yeah.
Right.
When there are a lot of companies out there that do the direct heat geothermal for households, like, which is different from geothermal energy generation. Like, it's same, you're targeting the same type of thing, but the goal is different. You're not trying to generate energy with the direct heat. You're just trying to use the heat that's around you to kind of direct it towards your house.
Yeah,
Sure.
yeah, and apparently that's like a 20-year cost recuperation or something like that.
Yeah, it's probably.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
Sorry,
We
I'm
want-
also trying to move my computer on the fly because the sun is moving.
Speaking
And
of
by the
solar
sun is
winds,
moving, I mean we are
The
moving
Earth is
around
moving.
the sun. But look
apparently
at
the
me
sun is
being
moving.
all geocentric.
Yes. Speaking of solar, there's another story from around the world you want to talk about, Nick.
I do. Morocco is poised to become a solar superpower. Holding for gasps.
What?
Morocco.
Intriguing.
I'll edit that to make it make sense. So what is the news itself?
Well, Morocco apparently occupies a lot of desert, and what's desert good for? Solar power. Woo!
Isn't that where they put when they make those diagrams that show
Yeah.
the amount of solar panels the Earth could run off? It's like Northern Africa. That's where they put the solar panels.
Yeah, they put it in the middle of the Sahara. They're like, look, this is all the space we need to occupy. And it's like, that's great because transmission costs aren't a thing. This is spectacular.
Yeah.
Why didn't we think of that before?
Yeah, all we have to do is tell whatever population is there that their needs are no longer important.
Right.
But, yeah, I mean, similar to Arizona in the States, you have these vast swaths of land that are, all they're really doing is pumping out sunlight. And if you put something there to collect it, you'd
Free
be
energy.
doing pretty well in terms of your energy needs. But Morocco is currently working on doing a few super projects, and it's deserty, vast expanses of land. But I feel this speaks to some issues with solar power, and I'd like to get your thoughts. One thing worth mentioning is that it's not, what do you call it? Like normal solar panels.
Okay.
They're parabolic reflectors
Mm,
focused on, a very small steel pipe, which is painted black or some such, and it's carrying something. The heat transfer medium is going at 393 degrees Celsius,
wow.
which,
It's
yeah, it's
hot.
pretty high, right? Um, and they're looking to generate 580 megawatts with
Wow.
an area as large as Morocco's capital city. And their first installment is generating 160 megawatts.
Right. That's crazy.
And oh man, I just had the link. Where'd it go? I was going to compare that to, Alberta's power statistics.
Right.
I think that's roughly comparable with all its wind. Yeah. Alberta's wind is currently 733 megawatts. So they're looking to make on the order of as much power as Alberta's wind generation produces.
Right.
But I thought it was interesting in that a lot of these large solar projects, you almost always hear about people doing the solar panels, the things that directly generate direct current.
Yeah.
But nobody ever talks about this kind of stuff where you have solar reflectors on, flashing water to steam and spinning a turbine. But in terms of mega projects, that's usually what happens, and I'd like to get your thoughts on that.
Just the two different systems compared of collecting solar, energy from the sun.
Sure. However you interpret that question, Rob, I want to hear your thoughts.
I mean, they're both interesting. Obviously, I would hope that some amount of research has gone into this project that has determined this is the more energy efficient and less cost overall.
Yeah.
Like, they go through the balance of factors and figure out that this is the most efficient way to do it. Then more power to them. I don't think there's a huge amount of difference. I know that solar panels tend to take a lot more precious metals to actually make efficient, whereas these reflectors are probably cheaper they're definitely cheaper to make, but they're probably sort of cheaper from a geological / precious metal type of sense. So you
Mm-hmm.
will probably be able to make this at scale a lot more easily. But other
And
than that,
I'm assuming that efficiency is pretty good, given that efficiency is often proportional to the hot reservoir versus the cold reservoir.
yeah,
That differential. If your hot reservoir is almost 400 Celsius, that's pretty good.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Obviously, every place needs to size and specify its power generation according to its needs. So I'm not familiar with what Morocco is looking for, but I'm just only assuming that solar and I don't know what you'd call this. I guess it's still solar, just not solar panels or photovoltaic. It generates power differently. Like it's still, you can generate, however many gigawatts, but the current or amperage or however you want to call it, capabilities are probably different between the two.
Right.
I can only imagine, spinning a turbine versus having to store the power in a battery and then step it up and all that kind of stuff. So I don't know enough about power engineering to know what the differences exactly are, but I'd imagine there are differences that came into play that caused them to do this. And yeah, maybe the prohibitive cost of the solar panels themselves were part of that.
Yeah.
Ooh.
I think that there's a lot more maintenance required with this when you're dealing with extreme heat and flowing water and spinning turbines versus a fairly non-eventful solar panel energy collection. So there's that to take into consideration, but it's definitely a different approach. And like Nick, you were saying, you don't really hear about these as much as you do with the photovoltaics.
Yeah.
So apparently another big part of this is that, it's heating these things up to incredibly high temperatures, but there's also a storage tank where the heat can be transferred.
Okay.
And it can be stored up to 8 hours. And so that can kind of deliver some of your off-peak demand as well, which without batteries is not something you can do with photovoltaics. By the way, Mike, thank you for saying the word photovoltaics because I had been searching for that mentally for tens of minutes and coming up completely blank.
Huh. The
So yeah,
Did you guys see the picture of the farm? It
yeah.
looks crazy. I just clicked
Yeah.
into it. It's cool.
yeah. And even like I remember reading in high school about solar power and all the different ideas they had for what solar power could be. And a lot of the really large scale power plants they had envisioned in like the 70s or whenever those books were from,
Mhm.
a lot of it had to do with mirrors and you know, something to point the mirrors at.
Yeah. Huh. I, Reading about what their goals are is very interesting. Talking about like they're already looking at transportation lines to cover basically the entire country and countries around it, and obviously the Muslim faith is very important in Northern Africa and in the Middle East, and they say that the ultimate objective given by the king is to get to Mecca, to power Mecca. I imagine that would be incredibly valuable, sort of politically and culturally, to be the ones providing power for such a important place. Um, it's interesting that that is the ambition because when you talk about sort of going international, you think, oh, applying this what we've done here, applying the stuff we learned in this project to other projects of a similar nature. But they're like, no, we're going to keep doing this, and then they've a total of 3 different plants that they're looking to get done by 2017, and they're just like, no, we want to just send our electricity. They want to make more than they need and then ship it out and presumably charge people for it.
And in fairness, that can be an important economic
Yeah,
factor.
definitely.
Like Quebec makes a lot of money from that based on their power projects in James Bay.
Right, for sure. Yeah. Anything else we want to say on the Moroccan solar power?
Oh, there is one thing I want to say about it. I,
Sure.
I absolutely adore this project and the kind of stuff they're doing with it. It sounds really exciting, but at the same time, it's just I can't see this applying to Canada at all,
No.
No, not really. Too
which
low
is
the sun.
sad.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're too far north.
Yeah.
Maybe what if we set up like 10-meter high panels right along the US Canada border all the way across? Just the best possible way to get solar power from the lowest possible latitude, longitude.
Well, and the best part of that is you keep out the dirty foreigners that keep trying to sneak in and take advantage of our free healthcare.
Exactly.
They're bringing
It's
their
also
crime and their guns
yeah.
and it's just terrible. If we could build a wall of
Yes.
photovoltaic panels,
Mm-hmm.
we'll
Dual
just
yeah,
dual
very good.
purpose. I wonder if anyone else has talked about building a wall like this.
Not like this.
Can you imagine if Trump's wall on the U.S.-Mexican border was just covered in solar panels and be like, there, the green people will love me.
I think it'd be a lot more popular. I mean, still unpopular overall, but more popular.
Deadpan sarcasm is still my favorite.
Yes.
Just my favorite.
All right, we have one more energy story here. We don't have to talk about this for too long, but I thought it was pretty important in terms of international implications. This week, the New York Times reported, and a bunch of other news outlets reported that China has been burning something like 15% more coal than their government actually let on, which is not a very, very non-trivial amount of energy because China has been going through sort of an economic surge. and most of it is coal powered. And it turns out 15% of China's coal output is very similar, on the same order of magnitude as the entire United States coal production. So I thought this was incredibly interesting and just kind of gives you a glimpse into, yes, we talk a big game internationally, different countries, about energy production and how they're making energy and how it's affecting our climate, how it's affecting sort of economy in general. But it's just like this was discovered. It wasn't like China said, actually, we've been lying about this the whole time. It was discovered that, these numbers are actually a lot bigger than they had ever reported they were. I don't know, do you guys have any thoughts on this? Did you hear about this before?
I mean, I knew that they were really booming on coal power,
Mm-hmm.
and that's just. I think they're officially classed as a developing country. Like they're pretty good at industrialization, but a large part of the country still doesn't have things like running water.
Right.
So, I mean, they're industrializing in the way that nations have historically industrialized, is to burn coal.
Yeah.
But
so the differences are from between the year 2000 and now, this coal usage, and this is right before there's a big summit. I think we even mentioned it on this show, or possibly on East Meets West. There's a big climate change summit going on with the UN in Paris this year, and
yeah, it's coming up.
Yeah, Canada sending a big conglomerate. But it's interesting that they've been making a bunch of promises to reduce the dependence on coal, and then it comes out that for the last 15 or so years they've been using a whole bunch more than they ever said.
Maybe they meant they were going to actually start doing what they said they've been doing.
Mm,
That's probably what they meant.
that would be a big step to reduce. Oh man.
It's
Yeah, crazy.
like, well, what are they going to do otherwise? So like, they're going to burn what they're going to burn. Like,
Right.
it's like,
They gonna burn what they gonna burn. Ain't nothing you can do about it.
it's true though. Like, what else?
Yeah.
I don't know. It's unfortunate, but it's like, well, we're in a worse position than we originally thought, I guess.
It's the Earth's climate, and it's unfortunate they can have an effect on it. Like there's talk every time they have international summits, they have the Olympics, they literally have to basically turn off their economy and ban cars from the roads for several days and turn off factories in order to have the skies be clear, because otherwise it's just super smoggy.
Yeah.
Basically across all of at least the eastern side of China. It's crazy. That's all I really wanted to say on that, but worth noting, and hope we'll have to obviously see what happens with this with the revelations at this climate change conference.
Well, I mean,
Yeah.
and at the same time, they have built the world's largest hydroelectric dam,
Mm-hmm.
which is so big that it actually affects Earth's rotation
Yeah.
somehow. But
Technically, spinning around in place affects the Earth's rotation too.
In a meaningful way, though, like in a measurable way.
I know.
Yeah.
Just saying that. But like, I guess the only way to really encourage them to change would be to do like embargoes on them, but we need them way more than they need us.
Yeah.
Like, we rely on them for a lot of manufacturing and importing and stuff, and if they have the leverage in that sense. Like, we can't do with them the same way we've done with Iran or Cuba or any of that kind of stuff, right? We being North America mainly, because that's kind of the U.S.-led type stuff. But like, there isn't really anything we can do about this, and that's kind of what I mean. Like, well, what else are we gonna do? Like,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
In that case, we'll wrap up our World Energy Summit here, and we'll wrap up with one more story here. Mike, you wanted to talk about the biggest change Twitter has ever made to their platform since its inception, basically. What happened?
Actually, I think going away with changing the manual retweets, I think that was a pretty big change
I
too.
think it was this one. I really do.
This
a big
caused the
change.
biggest This caused the biggest uproar for sure. So for those who haven't, either aren't on Twitter or have been living under a rock, I guess,
First of all, get Twitter.
get Twitter if you're not on Twitter. Uh, they've gone away with their faves and switched it for likes, a la Facebook and Instagram.
Yeah.
They've literally copied Instagram, and they now have hearts that signify likes instead of stars that were faves.
Yeah, but everything like it is the same.
It's the same function, but
Yeah, just the name and icon have changed.
according to Twitter, and this is kind of, it's almost humorous, that they found that people, new users, and maybe it's more, they kind of alluded to cultural differences, but they found that having stars being called favorites, it caused confusion,
Hmm.
and people didn't use them as much as they used things like likes.
Right.
So they figure that calling it a like and changing it from a star to a heart, because stars can mean anything in any culture. Like, it's not universally signifying something special or good.
Hmm.
So the heart is more universally something signifying love or like. And they found that there's a lot more engagement when you change it to a like with a heart instead of having the fave as a star. It's more just the star was so iconic to Twitter that changing it was kind of like a sacred cow type thing, that I think a lot of people were upward about it. Now, one of the big things that came out of this is, how do people use the favorite function? Like, when I'm on there, I use a favorite the same way to use a like on Facebook usually.
As
Now,
do I.
some people use it for bookmarking, apparently. I don't know who, but because every profile has a separate tab for favorites
Yeah.
that you can go to and see who's favorited what. But for the vast majority of people, they use it the same way a like. So functionally, it doesn't change for me, and for most people, I'd imagine.
Yeah. I know there are a lot of journalists that were in uproar about this, basically because they do use it as a bookmarking thing. I have never particularly used it that way because there are a bunch of bookmarking services
Yeah.
that do that and do it a lot better. But for me, first of all, I just wanted to point out I switched over to my tab, which I've TweetDeck open in the other tab, and I haven't refreshed this thing in like 4 days, so it still has stars. Like, just pointing out, I was using it. I was using this tab earlier in the day, and it's still, like, if you click favorite, it still works. It works the exact same way. It's just a different icon,
Yeah.
a different word. But in terms of this change, I think it does. People were saying, like, the fact that the heart is red makes it makes it seem a little more romantic than it would otherwise if the heart was a different color.
Bunch of
Which
communists.
I get, but it's just like, it's a social network. Nobody thinks that you love them because you heart a tweet that they made. That has never happened.
No.
Well, hold on now. If I heart one of your guys' tweets, you will know that that means I love you guys, right?
Of course.
Yeah, you are different. You're the
it's
exception.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good. I wanted to get that straightened out as soon as possible.
Yeah. This is the smallest, least consequential change that has ever really happened, and I think it's one of those things that every news organization has to cover it. Every journalist has to get out their 2 cents about it, and then a week from now, it'll just be the way things are, like what's happened with every other change that any social network has ever made. Things will change, and then things will go back to running again, because that's just what happens.
Yeah, as I said, like, Instagram has the hearts, Periscope has hearts,
Vine has hearts.
Vine has
Agreed.
Vine has hearts. So, even Facebook is coming out with more emoji-based reactions to the post. So, it's relatively inconsequential, but it's more just the initial reaction was something interesting to see.
Yeah, for sure.
So, can you not view your liked tweets now?
You can.
No, they're just
Okay.
retroactively
Yeah.
changed.
Oh, so it's exactly the same thing,
It's
different
exactly the
icon,
same.
different word.
Yeah. You even have Chrome extensions now that change the hearts to poop, like poop emojis.
I mean, you could
And
have had that before.
I think probably but they have ones that you
Well,
can change it so that they go back to stars. I think
Yeah.
people you can work around it, and if you're the one seeing it, then that should serve your purpose.
Yeah.
I think I am going to download a certain extension, a certain hilarious extension.
Yeah. I don't really think there's too much more to say about this, but it's more just kind of there's a media news cycle, and any change in anything is going to get outraged people somewhere. I was just like, oh, I've been seeing this. I have like 7 or 8 different Twitter accounts on my phone, so if I could cycle through them, and at any point during this beta testing, when some of the accounts were likes, some of them were favorites, some of them had different designs for likes. The heart was a circle, or it was just on its own, or there was a whole bunch of different things going on, and so it's actually kind of nice to have it be one thing again, as opposed to just wondering what's going on.
Yeah. Have you
I
guys
like
heard of
change, so
Have you guys heard of a hate fave before?
yes.
What?
That's
Apparently,
like a sarcastic one.
apparently that's a thing that people
Yeah.
used to hate fave. So say for like one of Donald Trump's tweets, it was just
Right.
so ridiculous that you fave it, but it's like, wow, this is ridiculous.
Yeah.
But now people feel that because it's a like and a heart, you can't do the same thing.
You
Like,
absolutely can't do the same thing.
it doesn't get across the same
It might even be
emotion.
better served.
Oh no, I can't hate fave my. God.
But like even that happens on every social network. Like on Facebook, people like things, and then like people like stupid, bad things. That's just the way humans are. I don't
Yeah.
think changing the word makes any difference. You guys happy with this week?
Yeah, it was a good week.
Yeah.
Good, because we're done for the week. That was your chance to get in any last words, and you did not take it. Thank you, everyone, for joining us for Future Chat this week. This episode was brought to you by Audible.com. Tell about the show and get a free audiobook of your choice and a 30-day trial. You can visit audibletrial.com/unwind. They're an audiobook service that has over 180,000 different audiobooks. And go try one out today. You can help out support the show. If you haven't tried it out, it's a 30-day trial. Why not? And we'll be back here next week again with more science and tech talk. And you can find past episodes of the show and more at unwindmedia.com/futurechat. See you next time.
Toodaloo.
Ciao.